Yes. So
Next one is this year's movie.
yes, this is Twisters, which I actually like. After the whole Kong Skull Island debacle, I like looked this up and confirmed like, is this really technically a sequel? It's not technically a reboot, and so I'm like looking at all. I'm like, yes, it's actually considered a sequel, even though it's very much a standalone movie as well.
Well, that's part of that definition was it stands on its own, but it continues a
Yes.
story or whatever. Where I would say, though, and what we might talk about is that it doesn't really continue a story.
It does not.
There is
No, there's
zero tie
no connective
whatsoever.
tissue. It is similar plot devices and story points. You know what I mean?
Very similar. Like,
very similar. Like
they started with the original script and just kind of rearranged some
Right.
things.
yes, and it's basically like a lot of people when they first came out with that first Star Wars sequel movie, The Force Awakens. A lot of people criticized it because it was so similar to the very first Star Wars movie from '77, and it was like there were so many plot elements that were exactly the same. And this movie, to me, was a lot of that. I would say my biggest issue with it was to me, and I don't know if it's because I loved the first movie, it lacked a lot of the charm of the first movie. Who would have expected, like, you got Philip Seymour Hoffman
Yeah.
before Philip Seymour Hoffman was like a huge name. You've got a great like backstory. It's a movie you've never seen anything like before. It's very exciting. And then with this movie, like you said, it's a lot of the same stuff. I mean, Bill Paxton and Helen Hunt were in the first one. I want to say I read some stuff that there were like some carryover characters or related characters in this movie that are like not focused on at all, and they're just like cameos. But it's like they basically wanted to make this. It was effectively, to me, a reboot, like in every way.
Yeah, because like it wouldn't have taken much to even make the main character, who is a blonde white girl in Oklahoma, Helen Hunt's daughter. I mean,
No.
it's been long enough. Like she could have been the daughter of Bill Paxton and Helen Hunt. It could have been a side note that just connected it to the first one, but even that wasn't. Like, there's literally nothing. Well, I guess there's a cameo by Dorothy, the robot thing, that
Yeah,
apparently is
right.
still intact after being whipped around by an F5 hurricane or a
Right, or
hurricane tornado. But so like other than that though, like that's literally
Yeah.
that and the fact that they're in Oklahoma are the only connective tissues. Everything, there's no returning characters, there's no returning links to the original characters. Everything's different.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but it certainly made me question even that. Is it really a sequel? Or is it
Yeah.
just another in a series?
Yeah, it feels more like it is it's an anthology, I think is the term I want to say.
okay.
It's like a series of movies with similar themes and plots,
Yep,
but it's
yep.
like it's not the same storyline. Because to me, if this had been released, if this had been written as a movie and the first Twister never existed, we wouldn't be missing anything to understand what's happening in this plot at
Right.
all. I think even though it's considered a sequel, I think it is the loosest definition of the sequel. You know,
Yeah,
it's not
yeah.
reliant on the first movie at all. And I think that was probably a strategy.
Yeah.
They didn't want to make it, let's not ruin anything about the first one for people. Let's make this its own movie.
I do still think that it wouldn't have detracted from anything had they just made her Helen Hunt's daughter, I guess.
Yeah. I
Or
don't
something
understand why
like
they
or
didn't.
niece. She could have been her niece.
Right.
I don't know.
Right.
Something
That would have been, I think it would have been,
because then you avoid having to like try and get Helen Hunt back. Maybe she didn't want to come back. Obviously, Bill Paxton passed away, so you've got Maura Tierney playing her mom, who is playing like the old wise aunt kind of
yes.
roles to an extent.
Right, which is
you
like
know?
another exact same character from the first movie.
So many things were exactly. They even have
Oh,
like
God.
the super corporate team and the
Yes.
ragtag team, except now that's reversed. Right?
Right.
The main character is on the corporate team, but all is not what it seems, right? Which was kind of predictable. I will say though that like all those things aside, I'll say it was exactly what I hoped the movie would be. You've seen the tornadoes before, so you're not going to be shocked by that at this point, because those were a really novel new thing in the first one. But in the end, I think they did a good job of making it a fun movie where it's a bunch of people trying to chase yet run away from tornadoes for an hour and a
Yes.
half, Tornadoes are doing their thing. So it was what I wanted it to be, I think. You know,
Yes.
even without the connective tissue or anything, they didn't make it too much about the people, and they didn't stray too far from the tornadoes. They didn't
Right.
go too far.
They stuck pretty well to the formula, I
Yeah,
would say,
yeah.
in general. It was enough of equal parts this and that were present
Yep.
in the first movie. I like Glenn Powell, who is like this
Yep.
rising star
Yep.
right now. I think he's
I
really
think
good.
he was great.
That's like a bigger difference in this movie is that Glenn Powell is this character who is like this YouTube guy who is a storm chaser, but he still has a meteorology background. He didn't go the weatherman route with
Right.
his life. Daisy Edgar Jones is the true lead of this movie that it follows most closely.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like the movie still starts off with her losing a close personal relationship in a tornado.
Yeah.
Somebody dies that is close to her, and it's like, holy shit. And
It was
you
very
could-
similar. I mean, like
all the
I,
beats,
I
all
was
the beats are
joking
there.
after it. It was like they took the original script and just tweaked a few things. You know.
Exactly. Yes,
But
I would
will,
agree with that.
I mean, and again, spoiler alert if you haven't already tuned out.
All right.
The that first 5 minutes there, they did ratchet that up though, where like instead of
Oh, yeah.
one person gets sucked away, all her friends, the entire
Right.
group except for her, gets sucked up by this tornado. And by the
Right.
way, why don't we assume these people got sucked up and died, but like we never see them land. Maybe they landed on a
Yeah.
mattress store or something, or a big pile of marshmallows somewhere. Like, where are those made? I don't know. Maybe they're made
Yeah.
in Oklahoma. But
Could
no,
be.
we're left to assume that they just get thrown at 100 miles an hour into a wall of concrete or something.
Right. Yeah, they just must be dead. There's no other way. There's something I noticed, and I want to see if you noticed this too. So, like, in movies, when there is, like, technical expert jargon being talked about with some kind of science or study that is not familiar to the viewer, trying to be subtle, you would try and work in an explanation for that feels organic to the interaction. But like repeatedly in this movie, and I don't remember this happening at all in the first movie, Glenn Powell was explaining very basic things that I, a non-meteorologist, already knows about storms. Like, he explains to her, who also very well knows
Yeah.
all of this stuff. He is explaining to her, well, you know, the classification of a tornado is about the damage. It's not about the wind speeds. It's
Yeah.
not about this. I'm like, you couldn't figure out a way to have him explaining this to somebody who is like the journalist, the British journalist that's there doing the story. You couldn't have it be that you explained it to him that way. It's something
Yeah.
I just noticed because it happened a few times where it's just like he's explaining something like she wouldn't have any
the
idea what
wrong
he's
person.
talking about. Right.
The science in this, that is one thing I think they did perfect in the first movie. It was like, it's just elevated enough that you don't need to know much more than a tornado is this terrifying, violent storm.
Right.
You don't need to know what constitutes F1 versus F5. You just know that
Right.
F5 is way worse, right?
Right.
That's a bad thing. And they're like, but we still don't understand them that well, so we want to get these little sensors to get sucked up by it and take a bunch of readings. Good
Right.
enough. That's really all you need to know. This one, they definitely they try and elevate it, right? You got to kind of elevate it a little. What's the next thing? I read a little bit online that the science is a little far-fetched, which doesn't surprise me. I don't know that you could just put some of this chemical in there. It'll just make the tornado go away.
Right.
I feel like somebody would have tried that if there was anything to it. But I'm willing to like suspend my belief there, whatever. But even then, they
Yeah.
kind of go a little too deep and a little too far, I think. And I don't know what the right answer would have been, but it's like there were times when it kind of felt like they were asking a lot of us, right?
Yeah.
In that regard, I'm still willing to suspend my belief there and have fun with it. It wasn't enough to really take it down too much for me, or certainly not enough to ruin it for me. I actually found far less believable the fact that at one point she was standing on a hill looking out over the horizon. Like, I don't know if are there hills in Oklahoma? Am I wrong there? I don't know. I can buy being able to spray a tornado with some chemical and it just, it's an F5, whatever. You've got a pickup truck worth of spray. It goes away.
Right.
But I don't know about this whole hills in Oklahoma thing. I'd have to...
That was a lot to ask.
Maybe I'm way off base there.
I would say the stakes were always higher throughout this one than in the first one to me. So there's like a really pivotal scene in the first one where they're at this drive-in and it's this looming... I wanted to make a criticism, but then I realized it was also very realistic, which was the people in Oklahoma are very dismissive and not willing to accept the threat of a tornado as being like real.
Yeah.
I want to say people in Oklahoma should take it more seriously than anybody.
Yeah.
But in reality, no, they are the most complacent of anybody in the world as far as tornadoes are concerned, because they're dealing with them all the time, and half the time they're probably a false alarm. So I'm like, I can't fault you, movie, for saying that, because it's like
I think
it's like anything.
Malcolm Gladwell, actually, I think one of the books that he wrote, I forget which one, he talks about, he has a whole chapter on that, like near misses and how they actually embolden. And I think he talks about in like World War II and England and stuff, at some point, the fact that the German bombs weren't leveling everything, people were just going about their business, and like you could listen to the whistle of the incoming bomb and know how close it was going to be, and like it weirdly emboldens the population somehow.
Yes.
I know that in Florida, I remember talking to people or down on the Gulf Coast like years ago. This was years after Katrina. I was talking about somebody down there and how like they would have like hurricane parties. Like, oh, there's a hurricane coming. They would party.
Oh, yeah.
Like Katrina was like an outlier, right? Like that was huge, right?
Right.
But like often it's coming, and like unless it is, no kidding, that high, is they've said it's coming right here and it's going to level everything. Like people are partying and stuff.
And you hear about it every year that there are mandatory evacuations. Tons of people that are not doing it. They're not willing to go along with. And they're like, no, I want to stay here. I'll be fine. Fuck you. I know what's good for me.
Because they've been fine for 50 years living in their house.
Yeah.
With hurricanes coming through. They're like, "What? It won't be that bad," and then it is.
Right. Absolutely. I would say I was probably in the same boat as you for like how I felt about it, what it did as far as like a sequel is concerned, and all of that stuff. It was a decent watch. I would call it like a decent popcorn type movie where it's just like you're just watching it. You know what I mean?
Having a good time.
You're not super invested. It's just fun to put on.
I will give them credit for not trying to really teach me a lesson. That's one thing in this day and age that sometimes these movies do too much of. They forget what they're doing, and they want to teach you a lesson about whether it's climate change or this or that and the other thing. That's not to diminish any of that, but that's not why I'm going to watch Twisters, right?
No.
I give them credit that they kept it inside the box, I think.
I would agree.
Acceptably so. Other than the fact that I felt like I'd mostly seen it already, I thought it was still good. It achieved what I wanted it to achieve. Where did you end up landing on your grade?
I gave it a B. I kind of waffled between... I wasn't really sure. I felt like B was the happiest medium I could reach because it was good enough to watch, and I like nothing about it really pissed me off.
Yeah. Yep.
And I think the grade is helped by my approach to it was exactly what it needed to be to enjoy the movie adequately.
Yep. I think, I also gave it a B. So I think we were like identical on every single one.
Neck and neck on everything.
Yeah.
Yes.
I also gave it a B, and for the same reasons as I just said, was what it was supposed to be. I think the only thing that probably kept it from being like an A was that, again, we've mostly seen it already.
Right.
It
didn't take
and
many
it didn't
chances
really
at
push
all.
the envelope to what we'd seen before. It was fun. It was good. It was a quality movie. No regrets. I don't regret that 2 hours as I do the last couple of movies.
Right. Yes. That's kind of where I'm at with it. I think it is easily the least sequel-y, but more rebooty than any of these other movies. Yeah. It's funny that we went from Kong Skull Island to Twisters, and it was like essentially the same situation, only one was actually called out as a sequel, and the other one was called out as a
sequel.
Yeah. It's like I say, there are a lot of movies we could have done for this, and like we were talking about, we want to get a good mix of good and bad because it's very easy to go off on a tangent about some movies, but some movies are more fun to talk about than others, and obviously when they're bad, it's very easy for me to go off on a tangent on them.
Yeah.
And when they're good,
Yeah, I just don't have as much to say.
right. It's just not as exciting. With a movie like Spider-Man 3, there was no limit to the amount of things we could bitch about with that movie. So it's like, what do you want me to do? You know,
Yeah.
I mean, it's just more
I've
fun.
got stuff highlighted in my notes that we didn't even touch on, but like at some point it's like, okay, we've
done
get it.
We've done our job. So yeah. But yeah, that is our series on action adventure sequels, and that was part 6, Twisters, which is very recent. I was surprised I was actually able. Originally, Dan had pitched Twisters before, like in his preliminary suggestions.
I had just
He
watched
had
it.
seen it. Yeah, he had seen it in theaters. I am the reason I am in the position I am is because I injured my ankle. I was going to see Deadpool and Wolverine. I was coming out my back porch, and I landed Goofy and broke my ankle in 4 places, and so I was subsequently unable to go see Deadpool and Wolverine or see this movie. But because it came to streaming as quickly as it did, I was actually able to watch it and check it out. So we covered it. So glad we got to do that. I like to cover newer movies that haven't been talked to death and all that stuff. So,
and I don't think we actually intentionally set out to do action adventure sequels. I think we just ended up sort of defaulting into it.
yeah, well, I think it was the easiest choice where it was just like there were so many options.
Yeah.
Most dramas are not going to have a lot of sequels,
Right.
other than Good Will Hunting, of course.
Right. And,
so
and we try and stay away from comedies because then it turns into just
parroting jokes and
Right.
stuff. Yeah,
Right,
and like horror movies. Obviously, there's no shortage of horror sequels.
That's true. Yeah, we
but
didn't really hit any
horror movies are they're just not as fun for me. Like, there's a reason.
Yeah.
Every year, I hold off all my horror coverage until October.
Yeah.
And I release like 3 or 4 episodes of horror type movies, and I'm done with it until the next time it comes around. I'm glad we picked the ones we did. I think we got a good mix. We definitely covered the best of the best and the worst of the worst, in my eyes at least. And so it's, or my eye, I'm sorry. I don't know why I had any expectation that we wouldn't be long-winded about this time.
I penciled in 3 hours.
Oh, okay. There you go. Yeah, so recording time, we're at over 2.5 hours right now. Yep. And that's been about par for the course for me and Dan talking on Trading Ratings. But yeah,
next time, I don't know. I'm leaning toward either like monkey movies or prequels. Those are the ones fresh in my head at the moment just because we talked about it. And I really want to talk about Kong Skull Island.
So that has been our Trading Ratings episode.
Or series of episodes.
Yes, right. Series of episodes. I appreciate you coming on, Dan. I guess that's what I am driving towards. Did you have any last thoughts or anything for...
I'm hopefully never going to sit through Spider-Man 3 or Jurassic Park 2.
Agreed. 100%. I know I will watch Spider-Man 3 again before I die. Really, but I shouldn't, but I will. I just know myself. I've seen Batman and Robin.
What would prompt you to be like, I want to watch something... There's 10,000 comic Marvel movies out there right now. I'm going to watch this one.
Have a good rest of your day. Bye now.